Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Richard and this is Lap of the World, your home for road trips and racetracks. My esteemed viewers, we are within enthusiastic spitting distance of 2,000 subscribers on the channel. So if you've been casually watching, or if you find a video like this one useful where we're working on a project, or if you've enjoyed any others, please consider a gentle click of the subscribe button down below. That's free to you and it helps me out a bunch. If you also click the bell next to it, you'll get a notification next time I upload a video either like this one where we're working on something, or when hopefully very soon we are able to get back out into the world and check another racetrack off of our list. Now today, as I have implied, we are in the garage working on a Gen 1 NSX-Specific project on my venerable 1992 NSX here. 283,700 miles on the clock, and it has kind of come down with a not uncommon affliction for these cars that is largely based, I think, on a combination of sun exposure, heat, and kind of mileage, which relates to the heat. But that is the degradation, of the flocked coating on the engine cover. Now these cars have a rear glass hatch that covers up the engine bay, and then underneath that there is a secondary cover, at least on all of the North American cars, that has kind of this flocked carpety coating to it. It's intended to be used as supplemental storage, but it's insulated at least from the underside, although it still gets very hot. You shouldn't put anything thermally sensitive there. But the coating that's on it tends to just start to fail over time, and you end up with fuzz on anything you set back there, and then it also starts to look kind of scummy, so mine had gotten that way, and I decided I would take the time during quarantine to do something about it. So that's what we're digging into today. Now, I kind of alluded to this in a previous video, and a very helpful commenter sent me some links to a thread on the NSX Prime forum where people had kind of illustrated a couple of different approaches to this. One fellow was just able to take it to an upholstery shop, pay a couple $100, and they recovered it for him, and he walked away happy. Another fellow, which is seems this is more along my speed here as far as my initial approach to things. I figure I can't make it any worse than it already was, so I'm going to try and do it myself. And the other fellow on the forum was able to then take some automotive trunk carpeting and some spray glue and replace this himself. So that's what I have. I have some about $20 worth of Amazon-sourced automotive carpeting, and about $15 after tax of some high-temperature spray glue, the highest temperature spray glue I could find on the internet. Not on the internet, but on Amazon, just to make it all easy. Came in the same order, but yeah. So we'll see where we get with that. With my $35 I've invested in this process so far, and we'll keep the upholstery shop in the back pocket in case this doesn't quite go as planned. But first things first, let me take you around the back of the car, and I will show you what we're working with. So as you can see, the engine cover has definitely seen better days. Getting into the actual work though, step one for me happened about a day before I filmed this when I started the fasteners marinating in PB Blaster. They looked pretty rusty, so anticipating a fight, I wanted every advantage. Step one for most people should just be removing the rubber gasket. This will be easier to do with the engine cover still fixed in place versus trying to remove the gasket when the cover is loose or off. Next, remove the 4 bolts affixing the engine cover to the bulkhead. Fortunately, they did not put up much resistance in spite of their appearance in my case. I suspect in most situations a 10mm box wrench will do the trick to get them loose. If you do need a small ratchet handle to get them started, like I did, the cover will raise to nearly 90 degrees, enough to get a socket onto the bolts. I then switched back to wrenches and then fingers to remove the bolts, as there wasn't clearance to spin them all the way out with the socket. With all of the bolts out, you should now be able to lift the cover off. Make sure the prop rod is accounted for so you don't accidentally drag it across your trunk. Once you have it off, now is a good time to go ahead and remove the hinge brackets and, if you're feeling particularly anal, the insulation and prop rod from the bottom as well. Now, this is where things get interesting. With an allegedly flocked coating, my presumption was that it would not just peel off, and I was resigning myself to spending a lot of quality time with a paint scraper and maybe some solvent. However, I found a video of some Japanese NSX owners taking an interesting and seemingly very effective tack on how to remove the stuff. Now, I too have a pressure washer, so I thought it was worth a shot. The underlying panel is just fiberglass, so theoretically it shouldn't mind a little water. Well, we seem to have met with some success there. The material that was previously not very well adhered to the engine cover is now distinctly no longer adhered to the engine cover. And I was also able to use the pressure washer to get most of what appeared to be also glue residue removed as well. So that's actually kind of an interesting point, because that was clearly a material that had been glued on. I think there's a common misperception, it would appear, as everybody refers to this stuff as flocking or a flocked coating on the engine cover. Flocking would refer to like an electrostatically applied loose fuzz that kind of goes into a glue or adhesive base. This is not that. This was definitely a material. You saw the way it came off. It peeled off. It did not need to be necessarily scraped or anything like that in my case, which kind of implies it went on as either a felt or a very lightweight carpet material, which I guess vindicates my approach of putting a carpet material back on, so I'm technically being OEM correct. That's all assuming this engine cover was original and hadn't had this kind of restoration done previously. I have no reason to believe that, and I'm not aware that it had ever been done. I don't have any receipt, not in my incomplete previous owner records that would suggest so. But anyway, that's where we are now. So at this point, I'm going to let this dry and see how much more work we need to do, any kind of light sanding or anything like that we might need to do to get it back to a re-spray gluable surface here. So with that said, I'm going to move this inside, and I will pick you guys up in like 2 seconds, which will be maybe a day and a half, 2 days in my time. And just like that, we're back. It is another day. This has had a chance to dry out, and then in the meantime, I've also gone over it with some 220 grit sandpaper just to knock down the rest of the glue residue that was left after the pressure washing. Now, that's left a bit of an imperfect surface here, and that's okay because I'm not trying to paint it. I'm just trying to get it to a gluable surface. And honestly, having a little bit of a rough texture from 220, I think will probably help the adhesion, whereas you would want to go much finer than that if you were going to paint it or do some other kind of like applied coating that wasn't just a fabric over the top. Now, speaking of fabric, that's the next step, is we're going to go grab the material, lay it over here and get it kind of cut to general shape. Then we'll go back, glue it down, and do kind of a final trim. And then hopefully we'll end up with something that looks at least presentable. Because I'm certainly no old hand at this, fingers crossed. And there are a couple places as you're trimming to keep in mind that this it is designed to fold under at a couple of points where I have it clipped here, so you do want to leave yourself some excess. All right, well, the good news is the felt is now on. The bad news is I didn't get a lot of that on film, but it's probably okay because what I did was probably a master class in what not to do in fabric installation, excuse me. Suffice to say that the glue does not mess around. You have to really be able to, you know, fortunately it's not windy out here today at all. If it were, I think I would have been probably screwed, but when you go to do this and you have the glue applied as directed before you actually go touching things, probably a two-person operation ideally, because you really need to be able to police what touches what at any point in time, because once two things are stuck, they are very disinclined to come unstuck, even from, you know, the first second. It says it's a 24-hour cure time. This is not like most glues where that means you can sort of stick it down and reposition it and it'll smush around. No, no, no. This stuff bites. Allow me to pause here to elaborate a little. My plan was, after trimming it, to clip the back edge in place, fold the material back, spray everything with glue, and then just fold it back over, smoothing it as I went. Unfortunately, when I went to do the latter, the clips had shifted and the material lightly touched the fiberglass cover a little bit too far back, and I wouldn't have had enough material to reach the front lip. Mild panic and more than mild swearing ensued, but I was able to peel it back loose with some effort and reposition it. I was definitely glad, even after that I had left myself in some extra space on my initial trim. We got it on there in the end, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let it set up. I'll probably go ahead and let it do its full cure for 24 hours. Then I'm going to go back, and as I do my trimming to get rid of this little frill and other things, I'm also going to go back here and we'll glue this down where it wraps around underneath. I want to make sure it's very stuck on the top before I go trying to fold it completely in half. And then as well, I'll put the hardware back on because I'll have to do some detailed trimming there because the hinge brackets do serve to also kind of anchor the fabric in the back. So I'll take care of all that at the same time, and I will come back to you with those results, and then hopefully we'll be able to get on to reinstalling it. Alright, so we are another day and probably 2 steps closer to being done at this point. I will flip the camera around here and show you what we've accomplished since we last left. First thing, I have gone around this edge here and just took some of these sort of garage, I think they're like Harbor Freight shears, and trimmed this edge here. Now, obviously, so if you're looking at that closely, it's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be because the rubber gasket will go over that and conceal all of it. So it just has to be neat enough to not get in the way of the gasket, and otherwise I don't care. On the back edge, we had to be a little more precise because, as I said, this material does wrap around here and then glue in place on the back side to give this a finished edge on the back. Not that everybody sees that because it's right next to the rear window right there and that bulkhead. So I was as neat as I needed to be to make sure it's functionally intact, but I'm not too worried about the aesthetics down here because really, if you're looking that hard, you've already found a lot of other stuff that's worse on this car. So I've reattached the brackets because they do help to sort of pinch the material in place, and otherwise I've kind of had this clamped down, especially here where I don't think I probably left myself quite enough overlap, but this glue is strong enough you could probably commit some war crimes with it, so I'll just hang my hat on its tenacity and hopefully it'll stay stuck. The rest of the surround, though, I think I have done pretty well. I did have a few more of these giant paperclip clamps on here earlier while it was still setting up, but I think it's mostly dry at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the gasket back on the bench. I know I took it off when it was still bolted to the car because that seemed easier at the time, but at the moment I feel like having two hands in sort of a more comfortable working position is probably the way to go. And then I'll get all the junk off the top of it here and we should be able to put it back on the car. Alright, well, with the gasket reinstalled and then the engine cover reinstalled on the car, it's kind of the moment of truth. Am I satisfied with the results? Absolutely. If I were grading myself, I would give myself a hopefully honest 7.5 out of 10 for execution. There are a couple of places where I could have been neater, where the fabric wraps around the back with the way I did the trimming there. Could have done that a little more precisely. Probably an order of operations issue that I just, because I have no experience doing this. Also, there are probably a couple of spots on there where I'm assuming that I must have touched the surface when I had glue on a finger. where the fabric's a little bit knotted, but honestly, it's very, very tiny spots. I would probably have to point them out for most people to find them. So, having said that, for $35 though, versus hundreds of dollars to pay for someone else to do it, I will take these results 10 out of 10 times. And having done it myself though, would I recommend that you try this? Well, that rather depends. If you have any experience or success doing automotive carpeting or headliners in the past, this will be easy. If you have no experience and you really care about the car being 100% perfect looking, you have a sub 50,000 mile Concours grade NSX, you probably want to hire a pro to do it for you. At the very least, then if it doesn't come out perfect, you have someone to yell at. But for my purposes on my car, this is amazing and I will take it every time. So, I hope you have found it useful to follow along. If you have, please give the video a like. If I have missed any tips or tricks that would make this go easier, please leave that information in the comments below so that everyone else can benefit from your own experiences. As always, consider subscribing if you want to see more of this kind of hopefully helpful DIY content on specific to the NSX or any other cars for that matter that I have, or to which it may be applicable. If you also click the bell, you'll get a notification when we do upload, and you'll be awesome if you do that. But in the meantime, we're going to call it there. I'm Richard. This is Lap of the World, and we will see you guys in the next video, if not at the track.